Russia and Ukraine seem to be heading towards confrontation over Ukraine. Is there going to be another war? What can be done to avoid war? Is it showing the rise of Russia, or is it showing the decline of NATO? To discuss all of that with us is Professor Nicolai Petro. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Hello again, Malik. Nice to be here.
Professor Petro teaches comparative and international politics at the University of Rhode Island, and he's expert on Russia and Ukraine. So tell us, are you alarmed on the Ukraine situation, or it's more hot talk?
I am alarmed at the alarmist tone taken by the United States, and I am concerned at the impact that this is having within Ukraine, which is conversely trying to dampen down this rhetoric and to suggest to its citizens that there is no real threat.
So for our audience, give us Ukraine 101. If Ukraine is trying to play down and other people are the one who are jumping over the fence.
So what happened, actually? How did we get to this situation? In November, the news site BuzzFeed was leaked information by U.S. intelligence sources that said that there were about 100,000 troops Russian troops massing on the Ukrainian border. U.S. intelligence then officially corrected that in other sources in early December, saying that it was more like 70,000, which is not that different, although most news agencies did not mention this. It's not much different from the 65,000 that are normally stationed in these military districts adjacent to Ukraine. Then again, at the end of December, intelligence sources leaked to the Washington Post, adding another extra 100,000 troops. Where are these 100,000 troops to be coming from? Not clear, but they could eventually be made to appear at the border, was the argument. The problem here is that meanwhile, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, the head of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, the head of the Ukrainian Border Patrol, and the president of Ukraine have all said that they see no extraordinary activities on the Russian side of the border. They say that, well, they're always under threat. They say, just as they have been for the past 8 years, but nothing extraordinary. So why does the US see a threat when Ukrainian officials do not? And I think that's the interesting question.
Well, since you have come up with an interesting question, what is your interesting answer?
I think the United States is playing a game for larger stakes. The stakes were heightened by Russia when it said, we're not happy with the status quo of NATO expanding contrary to its unofficial obligations made in the 1990s to Soviet leaders, expanding eastward and continuing to do so indefinitely. So that is the stake for the United States. But what I'm afraid of is that they've lost sight of the consequences in this game with Russia for what is happening inside Ukraine, which could result in a serious backlash. Let me explain. The problem is that US rhetoric today is actually destabilizing Ukraine. President Zelensky has had to go on national television twice to tell the population not to panic and that the situation is under control. But meanwhile, foreign investors are fleeing, the national currency is devaluating, Utilities in Ukraine are skyrocketing, I should say. And meanwhile, the United States is adding fuel to the fire by withdrawing its diplomatic personnel. I think it's a miscalculation of epic proportions on the part of the United States government.
Is it a miscalculation, or they want to achieve something by doing this thing? Because they probably know for sure that their currency is going down. President is begging people not to, and investors are leaving the area. I mean, this devastation of an ally is not quite intended. So what could be the broader goal for the intelligence community in Washington to leak information which can build up this situation?
The cynical answer would be that the lead countries in this heightening of animosity, the United States and Great Britain, are each looking for a way to rally their flagging domestic support by labeling a clear and well-known enemy. It's hard to be critical of your own president or your own prime minister for all the things that you want to be critical of them for when that person is rallying the country and argues that we need national unity in face of a dire threat. And that would be one explanation. Another explanation, which is hardly better, actually, in my opinion, is that the United States government officials at the senior level actually believe their own rhetoric. And the situation now, with all of the leaks and the insinuations from various American intelligence agencies to the media, which then repeat the same accusation and are then cited by politicians as independent sources when that information was leaked to them by the government itself. They simply believe what they read. I'm reminded of 19th century Austrian publicist Erich Krauss's famous statement about how do wars begin? He said, well, wars begin when politicians lie to the press and then believe what they read in the newspapers. The only difference here is that we have an added component of intelligence services which are leaking information to the press and then citing the press as confirmation of what they themselves leaked.
So this is going back to the Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction type of thing, right?
It certainly is something that bears a resemblance. These are not unusual incidents, but perhaps more properly seen as consistent patterns.
Tell us this. So miscalculation, lying to people, trying to cover up the domestic problems with the Prime Minister of UK has partying while telling everybody not to party, and the Biden is not doing so well. So, but what about there is a right calculation? I mean, Russia is in places in Mali and West Africa where there used to be only French colonial powers trying to do whatever they do, fighting imaginary challenges. Russia has done its job in Syria by essentially making America irrelevant in that very long and devastating civil war. And now Russia and China with Iran are doing naval exercises. And America, ignoring Pakistan, is getting closer and closer to Russia and China, who they were already had good relationship with. So what about their thinking of Russia is getting to many, many more spaces around the world? So let's stop them or challenge them prematurely on Ukraine so we come out and looking good.
Only if Russia backs down. And I don't see that happening. The investment, let me put it this way. What Ukraine means to Russia is comparable perhaps to what Canada means for the United States. It is an area of vital security interests. And therefore, if I were to estimate the resources that Russia would be willing to invest, compared to the resources that the United States has already declared it will not invest in the defense of Ukraine, I would say the mismatch there is tremendous and greatly favors a Russian outcome, which is why in the broader scheme of things, the calculation of that the United States should really be thinking about is how much do we want to alienate Russia when it is such a crucial ally for the United States in what is likely to be the defining competition in the latter half of this century, which is over global leadership between the United States and China.
So do you think China and Russia have less potential of collaborating, that America can sort of isolate Russia from China, who happen to have the similar communist background?
I think Russia and China are have potential for cooperation as well as potential for conflict. But America's policy is a foolish and unwise policy because they seem to be doing everything to push Russia and China into a closer alliance. Why the United States government would be doing that when every notable foreign policy analyst of the past 2 generations has warned against this is beyond me.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Nicolai Petro, for your wisdom.
Thank you.